Beyond the Spot, Decolonizing Healing One Brain at a Time, is a podcast that weaves my first love, of course, brain spotting, and somatic informed modalities with embodied healing, cultural consciousness, and real talk about trauma, resilience, and recovery. Hosted by Tracy Gantlin-Monroy, a licensed professional counselor, spiritual healer, and the first Black female brain spotting trainer in the world. Each episode dares to dismantle mental health myths, uplift lived experiences, and restore collective wisdom. One conversation at a time. Beyond the Spot podcast is for educational purposes and is not therapy. Please reach out to licensed medical and mental health professionals. Thank you. Yes, welcome back to Beyond the Spot, Decolonizing Healing One Brain at a Time. I am your host, Tracy Gantlin-Monroy, and I'm actually excited to be here. I almost feel a little rusty. March has been an explosive month in a very good way. And so there's been a lot of movement. In fact, I spent last week at the Psychotherapy Networker Symposium in Washington, D.C., and it was an amazing time, which is a beautiful lead in for this week's episode 35. It takes a village. Again, reviving collective care for nervous system healing. And I am Tracy Gantlin-Monroy, licensed professional counselor, Brainspotting Trainer. I sit on the Muskogee and Cherokee Native lands in Atlanta, Georgia. And when I say it takes a village again, we've kind of moved away from the collective of community, especially as it pertains to healing. Before we move into today's conversation, I just want to invite everyone to take a breath and take that breath and feel it in your diaphragm. If you're taking a deep breath through your nose and you feel your shoulders rising, chances are you're not breathing from your diaphragm area. Nonetheless, let your body settle wherever you're listening. Notice your feet. Notice your shoulders. Notice if there's a place in your body that is already trying to do the work of holding you together. I often say healing happens at the speed of safety, and safety rarely emerges from intellectual understanding alone. For many of us, safety emerges through relationship. I'm happy that you're here with us for this episode, and I am absolutely excited to have you here. There is a phrase many of us grew up hearing. And even as I began to talk about this phrase, many of us grew up hearing, I just want to invite every listener to just kind of check in with your sense of self so that you can center your presence here in the space. Many of us grew up hearing, it takes a village. And yet, many people today are trying to heal in environments where the village has quietly disappeared. People come into sessions, come into office every week carrying deep nervous system distress, albeit anxiety, hypervigilance, exhaustion, relational wounds, and very often they believe something is wrong with them. But as a clinician who has sat with people for many years now, I often find myself asking a different question. Not what is wrong with the person, but I'm always curious and fascinated by what happened to you or what didn't happen for you. And there are those times that I am curious around, where is their village? Because when nervous systems are expected to regulate without relational support, we begin to see what looks like pathology, when in fact it may be the absence of collective care. Today's episode is called It Takes a Village Again, Reviving Collective Care for Nervous System Healing. I am highly intentional about our conversation this week because it's a necessary dialogue that each one of us need to really sit with and be present and notice, because perhaps there's something that can serve as a friendly reminder that can recenter your system and put you in a space whereby you can maximize the work that you're doing. Individual healing is a cultural narrative. One of the most powerful myths in modern mental health is the idea that healing is primarily an individual project. You go to therapy, you work on yourself, you regulate yourself, you fix your trauma, but this framework actually reflects a very specific cultural worldview, one that prioritizes individualism over community. In many parts of the world, healing has never been conceptualized this way. Healing is and was always communal. Grief was communal. Joy was communal. Child rearing was communal. Spiritual life, communal. And the nervous system evolved within those relational environments and context, which means something clinically important. Our bodies expect the presence of other bodies. Individual healing is absolutely a modern idea. Much of Western psychology is built around the individual. Western world is highly individualistic. As a Black-bodied woman, I understand what that means in my system, because my system, from its root, from its origin, is and has always been communal. In fact, it's not uncommon for anyone to hear my community referenced as the Black community. I'm just saying, you can even Google the Black community. It is a thing. Just saying. So when I talk about this idea of Western psychology being built around the individual, here's where I'm coming from. The notion of individual diagnoses, individual treatment plans, individual progress. And while therapy is deeply valuable, it often leaves something out, which makes me excited to engage, to be with, to share with other clinicians of all races, ethnicities, genders, beliefs, because it's really a treat. Because my whole idea of the world is highly collective and inclusive. Even as the midwife of the persons of color community in brain spotting, I have a goal in mind. And that goal is that someday there will not need to be counter space such as persons of colors and affinity groups, because as humankind, as human beings, we're able to all be together, honoring, respecting, loving, supporting one to the other. I'm very clear about that. I'm very clear about passion work and my mission. Okay. And be clear, many cultures have always understood healing differently than much of what we see and what we hear about. In fact, much of it is referenced as indigenous healing because healing was communal. People healed through family, faith communities, storytelling circles, ritual, music, shared labor, collective grief. In many traditions, the community was not separate from healing. The community in and of itself was the medicine. I'm going to tell you something interesting to show you how, as an indigenous bodied, Black identifying woman. So, yesterday, I spent all day Saturday with my sisters in the Women League. Through the Women's League is an affinity group through the Atlanta Black Chambers. The Atlanta Black Chambers has been around for about 20 or so years. We're all business owners and or interested in business ownership. And so the Women's League is an affinity group that, as a member of the Atlanta Black Chambers, you automatically are a part of the Women's League. And I engage just about all their offerings since I've been a member. And I want to thank Babe, too, my husband, because he pushed me. He's like, you need to get involved. You need to go. Nonetheless, yesterday was a day of reset and retreat for the Women's League. We were out there in South Fulton at Enon Ranch, which was actually very beautiful. And we were able to experience nature. We were inside as well as outside. And as always, I made amazing contacts with the women. And I need community. Real talk, being one of one in my career as the first Black female brain spotting trainer in the world. And I just saw David last week too at the Psychotherapy Networker Symposium in Washington, D.C. That was actually my first time attending, and it was amazing. I need community. And sometimes I just need that dose of Black women. Collectively, we have a way of holding each other. We call it in the Black community straightening your sister's crown. It was so amazing to get that dose, whereby we even talked about it's not about your title, it's about your name. Who are you? And that's actually even a business acumen because, believe it or not, clinicians listening under the sound of my voice, people rarely do business with us based on our advertisements. Much of it comes word of mouth. It comes by someone who's experienced you and they shared you with family, friends, colleagues, coworkers, and things of that nature. But community is a part of who I am, going there with Ubuntu. Yeah. And so I was filled yesterday, and it was wonderful. to be with others that understood who I am without me needing a resume, without me needing to explain, and all of those things. It was just an amazing experience. Nonetheless, there's something about being able to identify your tribe. Now, when I was at the psychotherapy or psycho networker therapy symposium, it happens every year. And it was so interesting because I met a sister yesterday at the day retreat um, at the Women's League. And I'll tell you, it was so interesting because we began to chit chat, and she asked me for my card, at which I obliged because it's an opportunity for us to connect one to the other. And I said to her, I went to, Pessy's psychotherapy network or symposium, and immediately she expressed that it was an environment whereby we're underrepresented, and that being a Black licensed professional with the discipline of a licensed psychologist, that she's had to seek out other organizations and events of that sort to feel welcomed and noticed. And I shared with her that this was my first symposium, but I had to attest that I had an amazing experience. I don't know because the symposium will be 50 years old next year. And I did say to her, I said, sis, we got to represent. We got to be in the space. We got to be in the room. Because from what I experienced, from what I've heard, and all the things, they are progressive. Um, I saw people that look like me. There's actually even a clinicians of color group that is a counter space group that a dear friend of mine, Candace Dickens, and some others developed that at the symposium. And they started at like 30 people. Now we're like 300 strong. Um, I felt no ways about the classes I participated in. The learning, I was fangirling a bit. Got to sit at the feet of Deb Dana for a total day, which even makes our conversation and dialogue this week that more intimate for me because Deb Dana is a beast. Okay. And she is top of game with her craft. And I sat with so many others. I even sat in my mentor's presentation around brain spotting for trauma healing. And that was also nice. And so I will be back again for the 50th for the symposium next year. And I look forward to many of you, maybe, who have not participated. I'm letting you know I felt welcomed. There was diversity present. Um, but there were some different perspectives around it. I even met a lovely woman of Pakis- Pakistani culture, ethnicity, and she was just a joy to be with my time in DC. She's like a new sister of mine. I saw some old sisters of mine. Um, she taught me how to play Uno in a bar in DC. And it was one of the highlights of my visit, just from an intimate perspective of being able to come together with her, and we shared our work, and we just had a good time over wine. Okay. So, with all of that being said, I do want to pause here for a moment because this is something I often see, feel, and experience individually and in my clinical work. Many people come into therapy believing they are supposed to learn how to regulate themselves completely on their own. I just spoke about amazing um, the amazing experience I had in DC with myself and in the midst of the community that I was able to quickly engage, right? And so, with that, having the support, having people who were like me and different than me, having people who were same as me, people opposite from me, it was just so amazing because it was support even for my nervous system that I didn't have to regulate on my own. I met every nationality of people and we were able to co-regulate together. I felt so welcomed. I met people who were new at the symposium and people who were first timers, such as myself. Okay. But let's be clear. When someone begins to experience regulation in the therapy space or even in community, what is actually happening most of the time is co-regulation. My nervous system is present. My system is steady. My system is not trying to fix or control them. In sessions and or personally when I'm meeting people for the first time or getting to know new people, deepening the relationship. And that presence becomes an anchor point that allows their nervous systems to begin settling. But here's the important part. Therapy is not meant to replace the village. Let me say that again. Yes, psychotherapy is effective. There is the neuroscience to it, why psychotherapy is even um, viable. But just know, real talk, therapy is not meant to replace the village. Therapy is meant to remind the nervous system what safe connection feels like so that people can begin building it elsewhere too. It creates a ripple, if you will, because here's the reality. My being in DC solo for a symposium of thousands of people, you better know I felt safe. Yeah, I felt safe enough that I was able to have meaningful connections on every level, personally, professionally, individually, in a group communal perspective. I felt like I was with my girls. And shout out to Justin. Um, He lives in Virginia, and I met him while I was there. Oh, yeah, I beat up on him too, um, at the bar when we were playing Uno. And he was so patient and kind and lovely. And while he was with us, um, Justin identifies as a dominant cultured white heterosexual male. And he was just lovely. And I would check in with him here and there. And he's a clinician, and he was very protective. In fact, I'll share this story. I know they won't mind. So we were at the bar having wine. It was several of us there. And there was this lovely bartender that served me and Bach predominantly at our table, and his name was Keyshawn. Shout out to Keyshawn. And when we were leaving, of course, I was excited, so I started dancing that I was whooping some ass playing Uno. And I knew it was beginner's luck, but nonetheless, I was walking towards the bar and going to my money. And the people I was with said, it's already been taken care of. It's already been paid for, Tracy. And I graciously thanked Justin, who picked up the tab. And I said to them, I said, look, I'm an auntie in my community. And this sweetheart of a 27-year-old man has rendered such beautiful service. He was a black male. And I walked up to the bar and I said, I just want to tip you. I know that Justin has taken care of it, but I'm also aware of my role in community. I'm 56 years old, y'all. In the black community, I identify as American Black, but in my community, I'm known as an auntie. I'm known as an auntie in several communities, not only Black, but I know what the statistics say about the category they have placed Keyshawn in. And so I personally had a need to affirm, validate, and thank Keyshawn for his service. And I said to him, I know statistically they said you be doing this, that, and the third, and woo woo. And I introduced myself formally to him. I says, but as your auntie, I just want you to know I'm proud of you and I appreciate your immaculate customer service. You even played Indian music while we're in the bar because he was so keen, so relationally attuned that he noticed my new sister Bach identifies as an Indian woman. And while I was kicking her ass in Uno, she was just singing. She was like, he's on it. That's my music. And just his ability to be present. Then of course I got my Afro beats and I started doing my thing with that, but I wanted to share what I had with him in community. People at the bar began to introduce themselves to me, and I was honored and humbled at the same time. Yeah, I'd had a little wine. So, for those of you that know me, you know wherever I am becomes home sooner than later. In that mindful presence with the environment and with the people. And it was great. And Bach looked at me and she says, you know, you're something else. And I said, hey, this is what time it is. Yeah. So the nervous system is relational, y'all. And even from a neurobiological perspective, humans are profoundly relational beings. Polyvagal theory reminds us that our nervous systems are constantly scanning for cues of safety or threat. Look, when I tell you I sat at Deb Dana's feet for an entire day, I did both sections with her. She's a legend, and I wanted to learn from her. I wanted to engage with her. I wanted to be with her in that moment, and we absolutely connected professionally and personally. And one of the most powerful signals of safety is another regulated human being. Eye contact, tone of voice, body posture, presence. These cues help the nervous system shift out of survival responses and into states where healing becomes possible. This is why isolation can be so destabilizing. Loneliness is not simply emotional, it is physiological. And in brain spotting, that's where we work from. Brain spotting is physiological with psychological impact. Real tea. The body experiences prolonged isolation as a threat to survival. The nervous system needs other nervous systems. One of the most powerful regulators of the human nervous system is not a technique, it's another human being. Co regulation is the process where our nervous systems help stabilizes another. Babies learn it from caregivers. Think about it. This has so much to do with secure attachment and unsecured attachment styles. Adults experience it through relationships, through presence, through being seen. When communities disappear, many people are left trying to regulate alone. And the nervous system experiences that as a threat, y'all. Loneliness isn't just emotional, it's physiological. And I want us to start to embrace that the more. And be clear, collective care is not the same as self care. We hear that phrase self care constantly now, it's trending. And for those of you that know, I'm over the trending stuff. And I want to be clear even with this. There is nothing wrong with practices that support individual regulation. I do it all the time, but it's and both. When I talk about this idea of individual regulation, I'm coming from rest, meditation, movement. Even in our taking a bath, our journaling, all of that. And all those things matter. But self-care without collective care can become another burden. Another thing people feel they must do perfectly. Collective care asks a different question. Instead of asking, how do I fix myself? Collective care asks, who is holding me while I heal? And I just love that. My new friend, Bach, shared with me an experience she had going into Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's luncheon and how she was so activated by the presence of a dysregulated system that was sitting at her table. And she shared that she was so happy we had met the night before and that she was able to borrow from my presence and my perspective to be different in her nervous system, even as she encountered that dysregulating um, encounter that her system had become so familiar with, which is nothing but violence, y'all. Yeah, yeah. Her system was activated by the environment, whereby, as an Indian woman, she had to affirm herself that I belong here just as everyone else belongs here, as she was receiving the signal neurobiologically from those around her who were uncomfortable with her presence. And this sister is deep. This sister is going to Berlin in June to present work she's done as a psychologist, having worked with incarcerated individuals, developed a system inside the prison, helping those that she was caring for heal using, like, I think it's sand tray and um, nonetheless, she had an experience and it really blessed me that she was able to see me. We were like two little kids when we met back up, and she said to me, "Thank you for lending me your perspective because it was helpful." And while I was in that environment, I could have gone to default, but I didn't. I stood on it. I got that microphone and I said what I needed to say versus responding in rage, versus responding in a way that was not as helpful. So again, connection. We need it. Where is our community, people? And I'm not just talking about necessarily communities of sameness. What are we imparting one to another relationally in community, even as professionals? I'm talking to you. This is an invitation. Yeah. Nonetheless, I share much of my noticing over the years of practice and even personally. For those of you that know, that Master of Divinity is not just an acronym for me. It is through my work, through ministry, that led me to professional counseling. Y'all know it. This work is my call, it's not my job. My source is God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, period. That is the giver of my gift. Okay? So, when people begin experiencing genuine healing, it is rarely because they discovered the perfect coping strategy. Coping strategies ain't ever healed no damn body. Coping strategies help us in a way of managing our system. It is usually, and I'm talking about healing, okay? When people genuinely experience healing, it is usually because something shifted in their relational environment. Someone listened, someone stayed, someone showed up consistently. Someone made space for their nervous system to exist without judgment. And when that happens, the body often begins doing what it has been waiting to do for years: release. And with that idea of release, I want to talk about cultural technologies of regulation. Because many cultural practices that Western psychology once dismissed as primitive or irrelevant are actually sophisticated forms of nervous system regulation, albeit music, dance, communal prayer, storytelling, shared meals, rituals. These are not simply traditions. They are actually regulation technologies. They synchronize nervous systems. They restore rhythm. They reinforce belonging. And belonging is one of the most powerful stabilizers the nervous system knows. And I heard that from my new sister and girlfriend, Bach. She said, when you approached and sat down on the balcony, and as we engaged, she said, I felt no judgment. I thought, wow, who would know that? She didn't know judgment ain't my thing. She had no clue that I am who I am authentically, which becomes the invitation that you get to be all of who you are. And it's called love. Okay? So let's be clear about that. And I also want to share some cultural examples of collective regulation, especially with all the marginalized communities that we have, because the fact of the matter is, our indigenous communities still practice forms of collective care. In the Black community, we have church gatherings, family cookouts, and even when it comes to the family cookouts, one of the things we say in the Black community to identify if you belong or not is they ain't invited to the cookout, or they're invited to the cookout, right? So family cookout is a big thing for us in community. We have communal prayer, music, and movement. And in many Latin communities, there's the multi-generational households, storytelling traditions, shared childcare. In indigenous traditions, ceremony, land-based healing, tribal community structures. These practices are not simply cultural expressions, y'all. They are nervous system technologies. They restore safety through connection. So stop taking these holidays and thinking you're going to grab something from an indigenous community that you're getting ready to whip up. Stop it. Let's stop culturally appropriating in that manner. So, this takes me to this place of when the village disappears. Okay. So, one of the quiet realities of modern life is that many of the relational ecosystems that once supported people have eroded. Extended families are often scattered, communities become transient, neighborhoods lose cohesion, and people find themselves navigating trauma in environments that lack relational containment. When this happens, individuals often internalize the resulting distress as personal failure. And even sometimes, right? Not only personal failure, but sometimes people view that as a moral failure somehow. But sometimes the problem is not the individual's nervous system. Sometimes the problem is actually structural disconnection. When community is missing, we're all sitting in that because it's a quiet epidemic of modern life. And it is disconnection. Neighborhoods have become fragmented. Digital connection has replaced embodied presence for so many. The nervous system notices that, y'all, which is why even good therapy sometimes feels incomplete if someone returns to a world where they are still alone. How many of you know that even the work we do as psychotherapists or clinicians requires reinforcement? It's true. I always say to clinicians from my own experience of having worked with children for years back in the day, that you can't just work with the children in isolation of the caretaker, the parents, um, guardian, because as you're teaching these kids new skills, you got to bring the parents along or the caregiver, the care provider along so they can positively reinforce. The bottom line is healing needs relationships to sustain it. Facts. There are those moments in therapy where I have sat with clients and quietly recognized that what they are experiencing is not simply personal trauma. It is the grief of living in a world that no longer holds people the way communities once did. And naming that truth can be profoundly relieving because suddenly the person realizes maybe I'm not unfixable. Maybe I'm not broken in the way I thought. Maybe my nervous system is responding exactly the way it was designed to respond when connection disappears. Maybe my nervous system is truly sacred. Here's the deal. Here's the solution. Rebuilding the village. Reviving the village does not mean recreating the past exactly as it was. But it does mean remembering something essential. Humans heal better together. And the fact of the matter is, the village may look different today. It can actually look like peer healing circles, mutual aid networks, faith communities. How about chosen families, community organizers, cultural spaces? What matters is not the form. What matters is the presence of relational safety. Because when nervous systems feel supported by multiple relationships, healing becomes more sustainable, especially for you folk that identify as unattached while desirous of a partner, of a relationship. Check that. Clock that T. Shared regulation, shared witnessing, shared care. I stand on it. I trust it. I believe in it. If you are someone who has felt like healing is something you must carry alone, I want to offer another possibility. This is all about unlimited possibilities, y'all. Your nervous system was never designed to do it by itself. It can't. The nervous system was designed for connection. Your nervous system was designed for connection. The body calms when it knows someone else is there. Healing in and of itself becomes more sustainable when it is held by more than one pair of hands. Healing has always been a collective practice, and maybe it's time for us to remember the village again, because healing becomes more possible when it is shared. Shared attention, shared presence, shared care. And perhaps part of the work of healing in this era is not only repairing individual wounds, but also remembering how to build villages again. Thank you for spending your time with me for this episode. It is my absolute pleasure. And if today's episode resonated with your nervous system or your spirit, share it with someone who might need it. And if you are a clinician interested in deepening your understanding of relational neuroscience and embodied trauma processing, consider joining one of my upcoming Brainspotting trainings. Until next time, remember, healing is not only an individual journey, it is a collective practice. Healing was never meant to happen in isolation. Beloved, I love you with all of me. I truly mean that. And until we meet again, I am Tracy Gantlin-Monroy, and I'm going to stay in the trenches with you. If today's episode resonated with your nervous system or your spirit, share it with someone who's still unlearning and reach out to me. My website is gracecommunitycounseling.com. You can reach me on Instagram at Monroy LPC. That is MONROY LPC. Also, I have offerings from retreats to brainspotting trainings to workshops, you name it. And I am also a speaker. So if you ever need a speaker with my skill set, look me up. Give me a call. Let's see what can happen. And absolutely for you clinicians and adjacent body healers, feel free to reach out and attend a Brainspotting training. We have trainings all the time. Thank you.